Zero ends. All right. Welcome again to another edition of Zero Ends channel podcast. And today's stream is the conclusion of chapter 2, section 2, the unsexualization of the book titled Endangered of the Black Family in the 21st Century in chapter. Okay, so no further ado, not to hold up anybody. As y'all come in, make sure you like the stream, share this stream. If you're not subscribed to Zero Ends channel, waiting for it, hit that notification bell, hit the top bell, like always. And that's pretty much it. So let's get started. The official blueprint. The reports is out from the Commission of Population Growth and the American Future Establishment in 1970 by the Nixon administration. It is born of a conscious government policy to help improve the quality of life through population control and the old ideal of racist eugenics decades past. Now, mind you, this is roughly 50 years now since they started the initiative to really start speed up the depopulation of people. It was always in the process throughout a century, but it was only more focused on darker people or people that are non-white. But as we approach the 70s, particularly here in the policies that was pushed in America, they decided to make it a more priority focus. And now, 50 years later, you're seeing the rapid speed of it. So keep that in mind. The commission was cleared or chartered by John D. Rockefeller III. As you may recall, amongst its 24 members are Bernard Barson of the Barson-Jaffe Memo of 1969, which I read in previous podcast. You got to go back to that. President of the Population Council, Senator Alan Criston, Congressman James H. Sherrill, and the Executive Vice President of the Ford Foundation, Vice President of the Amalgamation Clothing Workers of America, and last but not least, one Charles F. Westhoff, the Commissioner, Executive Director. Remember his name, for we shall encounter him again. At least one black individual is included: Anna Young Boswell, sister of Whitney Young and a University of Chicago social service professor. Some years later, she would show up at a black think tank on the Black Family Organization of Notre Dame in 1978. There she would seek to discount any sexual difference in inability to the nurturing of infants. She is backed by the other participants at the conference who appear wholly unwarned or unfamiliar with the contrary writer, a pioneer feminist sociologist, Alice Racine, in Delibos the previous spring. I think it's called De la Boas. I think it's some French name, maybe. Later, Miss Boswell would help to organize the 5th National Conference of Black Women in Business held in Chicago, ostensibly put on by League of Black Women, whose president, Barbara Proctor, would later advocate pouring her membership into the almost lily white now after Aileen Hernandez, the only non-white head so far had called now racist. Anyway, the business conference was backed by whites. One of the white person on the panel responded to the keynote speaker, and later that her conference had been ruined. The theme of the conference was bringing back women into the big time corporation under anti-male venom, hearing no different in white and black males. The white panelists patriarchally, or particularly the white male members were enraged to conference respectively to let magazines then ask for a copy of the speech as written type, took pictures of the speaker and two of the black women leaders and select a picture for let under which the captions had the speaker saying just the opposite of what was said. This appeared in the same issue with a picture of participants on a National Urban League convention panel moderated by Tony Brower, dealing with the impact of television and the mass media of black children held in weeks or as later in Los Angeles. This panel includes actress Pamela Greer, producer Norman Lear, Esther Rowland, Raymond St. Joaquin, and the same speaker who had been keynote speakers at the Business of Women conference. However, the speaker complete figures except an arm have been clipped from the picture as it appears in the jet and the accounts of the participant, including no reference to the fact that the speaker in the question had even been a member of the panel. At the Black Business Women Conference consists of 400 of 500 black women, corporate managers, and the likes of leaders moving on top. They dropped everything at 3 p.m. sharp and held a discount dance with only 3 men present, and one of the guys, or one of them, are gay, whom soon filled for his very life. But let us return to 1972. In a report of the Commission of Population Growth and American Future, for it was a blueprint that is truly shaping America and the world in the most essential respect today, implying us on a stringent course, perhaps soon irrelevable or irreversible, towards a unisexual society in which everybody's freedom will be placed before our own, often with our active collaboration through not as voluntary as many believe, who really have little awareness, but they think they have much about the way in which values are shaped in the computerized post-industrial society. This was already predicted and already initiated during the time of this reading, that they were going to look at people that had sexual confusion before they look at the rights of black people, melanated people especially. This was already put in effect 48 years ago, mostly roughly 50 years now. So what you see now in the present day here in America was already scripted and enacted decades in advance, as people know the policies that we're seeing now affecting a lot of people. So that's just an important note for those who are not familiar with the environment that they live in now. You know now. You get me? So, hold on. So let's continue. The commission was charged expressly with making recommendations consistent with the foundation value of American life. As the commission itself describes it, in 2 years they had determined that 1, continued population growth would aggravate some of our most pressing social and economic problems. Number 2, an average 2-child family may be achieved by varying combination of non-marriage or childlessness. This non-marriage and childlessness would be free choice. Let me highlight that, free choice. Get it? Abortion and birth control were the means that prevents or terminates unwanted pregnancy on grounds that a nation growth should not depend on the ignorance or misfortune of the citizens that is socially disadvantaged, accounting from class or and race. Another means advocated by the commission was increased employment and career correctness or centeredness of women, echoes of the Bernson-Jaffe Memorandum, as we shall see frequently. Number 3, also increased public convictions and concerns to be orchestrated, of course, over the alleged negative effects of population growth. At best, a popular value judgment, but not at all a proven scientific fact. And number 4, discourage youthful marriage while encouraging youthful preference for smaller families and increased access to abortions and conceptions, especially among the blacks and the poor. In addition, mass medias are to be encouraged to downplay traditional sex roles, unisexualization, and the eradication of pre-nationalist laws and social institutions, pro-nationalist laws and institutions. I hope that didn't went through a lot of y'all head. Anytime anybody wrote a script that how they want everything in society to play out, they write it out like any plan, they carry out, and the effects you see decades later. And mind you, BET did not came into existence until 1980. So whatever programs BET was putting out for the last 24 years before it was bought off by, I think was Viacom back in 2004, which is now roughly 16 years ago. All this was lined up to play off, to divide and conquer and destroy more of black people, especially when it comes to unity in regards to black men and black women. And the problem we have here in the podcast and YouTube space, that we have such an issue with relationships with black men and black women, is ridiculous. But all this was strategized and put out through policy and throughout other people for your demise. So let that sink in for a minute. The commission had further determined that mainly because of difference in education and income and a general exclusion from the social economic mainstream, unwanted fertility weighed most heavily upon certain minorities groups. But while aware of the social economic factors affecting fertility, the commission does not propose to correct these inequalities, but instead rests its case on the notion that if blacks could have the number of children they want and no more than fertility that of the majority white population would be similar. That is, the fertility, though affected by social economic inequalities or inequalities, would be altered by juggling other factors. In this effort, the commission proposed not only the atonement of billions of dollars, at least $1/2 billion annually, but also the transformation and denegation of motherhood, or degradation of motherhood. Childbearing social values and the very nature of males and females include the very nature of female physical bodies now to be embellished with the muscular attainability for barbells, transsexual surgery for willing males. All of this is pegged on the rhetoric of the freedom of women, though most of the archetype of the schemes are men to control their or her own bodies, presumably by becoming infinitely more available to service means sexual than a turn in a subject to the machinery of surgical birth control, at the least of instrumentally of abortion. Beyond this, the commission set it as of its chief goal that the government should help guide internal migration and foreign immigration so as to ease the problem brought about the population or by population movement from farm, town, and village. Black migration from South would figure heavily here and from countries abroad to our large metropolis area. Further, the commission proposed to modify sex and family roles in place of a supplementary to motherhood. As the 1969 Bernson-Jaffe memo proposed and is Mrs. Anita Young Boswell would later suggest at the Notre Dame think tank on the black family. However, you must understand, readers, that the person being quoted here is the Frederick Jaffe, one half of the Bernson-Jaffe team. Burleson was on the commission. An exclamation point. Jaffe died the year of the 1978 think tank. So Jaffe memo, or the man that wrote this, he died 42 years ago. Imagine that. Interesting. Also, the commission charge found ways to reduce fertility by offering women who want to work the opportunity to enter the labor force much sooner than they would be able or inclined to otherwise. Moreover, subsidize families who wish to and are qualified to adopt children but are unable to assume the full financial cost of a child care. Understand that they are proposing this when they could have proposed to subsidize women who gave birth to the children without stigma, so that motherhood could once again become similar in honors to segregate mothering the same for fathering, but this would increase the number of children among the blacks and the poor, precisely the problem these liberal practitioners of genocidal are endeavoring here to solve. Still, others recommendations of the commission, as reported by Frederick S. Jaffe, assume the highest priority to research to reproductive biology. Create a strong base from here to carry on expanding biomedical, social, and behavioral research, proven at least 100 million annually, mostly in federal and particularly in private funds for development work of methods of fertility control. Halt legal immigration, which exacerbate many of the economic problems through the effortless or the effective enforcement backed by the tougher federal legislation. As you read recent in the newspaper, the Reagan administration is working on this one right now, developing national population distribution guidelines, including goals, objectives, and criteria. A Carter Commission encourage cross-regional migration and to let the central cities die. Get it? Develop clean source of energy produced such as nuclear fusion. The commission further recommends the attachment of a Population Education Act to help persuade young students to accept the ideal and values of genocidal population controls. Promote a diversity of styles of family life in America today, lifestyles, including expressively the acceptance without stigma, the ideal of childlessness. No children. That's not a word, but my childlessness. Urge the media to assume more responsibility in presenting information and education for family living to public. Increase support of research to identify genetically related disorders, such as sickle cell traits, better screening techniques, etc., and the exploration of the ethical and moral implications of genetic technology and genetic screening. The old line eugenics. Women are to be encouraged to spend less of their lives in maternal functions, instead to work, seek higher education, and choose roles supplementary to or the place of motherhood. Thus, alternation should not be sought on demographic grounds alone, but as a means of offering greater range of choice. Further, it would be particularly helpful if marriages, childbearing could come to the views as more deliberate and serious commitments rather than as traditional compulsory behaviors. Thus, attracting work may effectively compete with childbearing and having the efforts of lowering fertility. That there be a freeze on legal immigration and a crackdown including civil and criminal sanctions on employers on illegal aliens or unauthorized employment. This is in the hopper right now. Finally, after urging the ERA be ratified by all states, you can't win them all, at least not the first time around. The Commission calls, frankly, for long-run national policies of eliminating the ghettos. And you know, the ghettos were created back in time for Europeans during the early parts of the 20th century. And eventually, as we run into the 60s, going to 70s, black people were in what we call quote unquote ghettos. And remember, the ghetto is a rat experiment project, mind you. While adopting a short-run policy of making the ghettos more palatable to this inhabitant, 1973, the Nixon administration determines that hiring preference for black to make up for past injustice and on-site is to be replaced by a merit system. Civil rights is the law are to be enforced less stringently, and discrimination clearly in violation of the law must be established for the government to act. The government will no longer attempt to force integration in schools or suburban housing. Busing is to be opposed, if necessary, by a constitutional amendment. The U.S. Supreme Court legislature, abortion. The American Psychiatric Association declares what they call homosexualization, to be normal. Let's read that again. The U.S. Supreme Court legalized abortion, and the American Psychiatric Association declared homosexuality to be normal. 1973, roughly 47 years ago, proven by this book, and was written out back in the 80s. 1974, the Census Bureau reports that decline in fertility in the United States is most pronounced among blacks, Americans, Indians, and Mexican Americans. They're getting there. There is also more families decaying, more broken marriage, and more single mothers among black females and males in their 20s. The suicide rate will skyrocket. Richard Nixon bowed to the Watergate scandal and resigned to avoid prosecution. Jerry Ford steps in and pardon Nixon and to carry on. With him is Betty. 1975, United States State Department Association of $154 million more dollars for population control. Federal expense for domestic programs have tripled since the enactment of the Family Planning Service and Population Research Act 5 years earlier. Britain passed an Equality or Equal Pay Act for women, followed by 11 years, the action of the most precocious offsprings of the United States. 1976, non-white women are 3 times as likely by now as white women to be aborted in the United States. Late in the spring, above 500 black women hold a conference at the Berkeley YWCA House, and the hidden agenda expressed by conference leaders and voiced openly at the climax of the meeting is to find a way for black women to begin to find alternate to black men. The answer proposed are white men and homosexual reinforcement. The only male speaker at the conference expressed opposition is almost lynch. But the spirit of the conference and the Native Initiative, the split and broken Jaffe of the Jaffe Burnson team dies, but his struggle continues. 1977, Carter administration found the ERA conference in Houston. Many black women who until now had remain suspect of white women and uneasy with an agenda that is not of their own making, not fitting to their need, instead of the need of the unpredominant middle class white woman. Leaders will begin to join the feminist movement in leaps and bounds. This is especially true, understandable, in the black lesbian, but also the integrationists of every persuasion. 1978, the first test tube baby, Luxelle Brown, is born in London. Often will follow all over the West. Actually, others will follow over the West. It is part of the biomedical research advocate of the Commission of Population Growth and the American Future through previous governmental bodies have already initiated such research. The Carter administration grant an unprecedented 3-year extension to the deadline for passing the ERA amendment to the Constitution. In 1979, Michelle Wallace devised the tribe of the black macho and the myth of the super black woman and published. Hold on. 1979? Wait one second. Hold on a second, guys. Let me read that again for y'all. I'm sorry, I had to look at that. Make sure I read that right. 1979, Michelle Wallace devised a diatribe of the black macho and the myth of the super black woman is published. She is placed on the cover. Where is this? Mrs. Magazine and become a household name, but she will not be popular with most black thinkers. On top of anything else that can be said against her, she is violating the black intellectual mythonium derived from the Parson-Erickson directive Viva Andy Bilginson through inacceptable enough. Got tongue-tied a little bit. The image making is perhaps a better words, more inclusive that mythmonion for the she might have gotten over had she called it the myth of the black matriarchal or matriarchy, or the kept super black women but left out the myth. And remember, myth is not reality. If y'all know that. The Surgeon General, Julius B. Richmond, determines that governmental physicians will no longer consider homosexuality abnormal. Readers, do you remember Charles F. Westhoff, the executive director of the Nixon administration, Commission on Population Growth and the American Future? The one that determines that in order to keep down fertility and therefore to liquidate social unrest amongst the blacks and the poor of America and the world, women should be encouraged to work and generally to disdain motherhood. Let's read that again. The one determined that in order to keep down fertility, therefore to liquidate social unrest among the blacks and the poorest of America, the world, women should be encouraged to work. And then generally to disdain motherhood, that marriage should be discouraged, but childlessness encouraged through the education of youths and mass media permission, etc. And I'm gonna pause right there. If y'all notice from indie space, we could say all women, but let's say for our sisters, black women. You hear how they said that their mothers had it so bad, they were oppressed, women had the right to work. No, you were made to work. You were always working. And not only you were working to a degree, they made you work more. And you just didn't know it. They're convincing most people that are melanin or black to work more. Always a man's going to always work if he can find work back in them time. And some men are doing well now through the data. That's my check. But you've been encouraged and programmed through the same studies, through your mother or grandma during the 60s, most likely, to get out of all this, but to work. All that was planned and designed decades in advance through the system. And now if you look at today, you can't function now without two people bringing in money. As you know, the economics in this country is only surviving off of credit. The money's useless, as y'all know. But we're not going into that. Let's continue reading. Here he is again in a January 1979 issue of Psychology Today, when Richard Eastern, a demographic at the University of Pennsylvania, conclude that the rapid rise in the labor force participation rate of young women since the 1960s, now 60 years ago now, was not due to increased job opportunity for women. The labor market for younger women had in fact been stronger before 1960. According to Esterlin, that the pill as an explanation for birth control was an effective and what they call attitudinal and biomedical research emphasis, and change more than a cause of women rushing to the labor force. That's the women's movement also was a result more than a cause of increased labor force participation of women. Charles F. Westhoff, who you may recall was the executive director of the Commission of Population Growth and the American Future, was asked what he thought of this without baiting one eyelid, and the Watergate era social engineer replies. And this is what he said. It seems to me it misses the whole point. There is a hell of an increase in childlessness, I suspect, though it is hard to nail it down. A very large proportion of women are working, marriage has gone out of style, and fertility has dropped out of sight. This raises an interesting question. about the future of the whole marriage institution. That's what he said. As if Westhoff had nothing to do with it. It's just happened that way. A matter of your choices. You see, at least you get a chance to vote between the two candidates. They follow you for president. You don't even get a vote on the program of unisexualization before the master of deceit has started the wheels of popular belief to turning. 1980, 1,000 black men met as black men in the Oakland area to organize for the purpose of motivating and resurging the black male towards protecting and providing for his family better. Take care of business, save the black man, women, and child. For that, they are criticized and denigrated as sexist by the black feminists and integrationist black male community leaders. See that? They said protect the black family. They said we don't want to protect the black family. We want to do our own thing. Sad. That's sad. The World Health Organization reports that baby milk formula outlawed in the United States are being described elsewhere, killing an estimate of 1 million of the third world babies a year. This is the International Year of Women. The U.S. International Conference is held in Copenhagen. U.S. Ambassador in the United Nations Donald McHenry attended as the co-head of the predominantly white feminist delegations from the U.S. Belle Abzing, who chair of the 1977 ERA conference in Houston, and with George Bush kicked off the campaign in 1972 to get the ERA ratified, was there. She made an offer to the Iranian. They had to refuse all but 4 of the 91 nations presented votes and resolutions. Equate Zionism with racism. Only Israel and the United States, Canada, and Australia did not agree. Lyndon Baines Johnson, Rob, was there. Soon Betty Ford and Lady Bird herself became ERA leaders. Rabbi Sol Ruth, new president of the Orthodox Rabbinical Council of America, recommend that Jews eliminate from Jewish communal life all persons who marry outside the faith, which include you. And further, that the rabbi who performs the ceremony also be purged. Rabbi Alexander M. Schilner, president of the Union of Hebrew Congregation, as much opposed to Rabbi Roth plan, but agreed that intermarriage is a threat to Jewish survival. That means interbreeding. So, but yeah, because when you start mixing in with non-whites, particularly in certain tribes and groups, it does affect, your nation. Unfortunately. Let's continue. Carter bows to Iran and the Middle East crisis. George Bush of ERA and the wide international oil experience for the United States rides in with Ronald Reagan. This cowboy is for real. Eventually, they will be joined by the head of Beckenhill. 1981, Betty Fraudein changes her mind and moves into the second stage of feminism. Return to family and winning male collaboration to build families now that the damage is done. There is a moral majority out there, meaning they want some of the right things for many wrong reasons. There also is something called herpes. Excuse our sexism or sexpery, if you please. I don't know if that's a word. The Department of Labor announced in the black press that while white women gained a term of labor force participation during the 70s, as blacks slipped back, we had predicted this in 1969 and provide a statistical by 1974. The concept of comparable pay is enacted in San Jose and passed the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, soon will be advocated nationwide. In this little dozy selection occupation, traditionally women will have salaries raised across the board to equal those deemed comparable to select men. Occupation affects white women predominantly would have white clerical jobs raised to equal the pay for the blue-collar occupation comprise the majority current ceiling for black males. 1982, the ERA failed to receive ratification when many previous backers threatened that the vague language could usher in court demands that not only would prove bizarre, but also petty, unsexual linguistic change, and all would take away some of the female privilege, such as freedom from compulsory heavy-duty military service. The now vow to go after distractors and to unseat unfriendly publications of any others who failed to bow to their ideals, and NAACP and other Jewish organizations adopt a similar policy for themselves. An epidemic of genital herpes was sweeping the Western world with sexual license goes certain side effects. The wage of sin is herpes. A diabolical disease invades the homosexual community in epic proportions. It is called immune deficiency syndrome. According to the New England Journal, medicine studies show more than 80% of homosexual volunteers have far fewer white blood cells and fight infections when compared to the heterosexual control group. Professor Godfrey Thorburn and Dr. Richard Hardin of Monash University informs of the Melbourne Age newspaper there is no reason an embryo fertilized in laboratory could not be implanted in the belly of a man and derives later by Carcerian or cesarean C-section. Proof. Carl Words of Monarch University Test Tube Babies program reports that embryos having already been successfully implanted in male mice. Do we really need this one? The United States of the World Bank concerns that some non-white nations, Africa especially, have resisted their birth control programs, largely due to cultural factors. Frank Hoskins, editor of WIN Women's International Network, News is Policy, black publications threatening to persuade large white advertisers to pull down if they are not critical of African reproductive culture opposing by feminists. Their same force keeps trying to persuade the Arabs to give up the veil. Frank Hoskins has even started urging the United States to withhold aid from target African countries clinching to their own cultural reproduction. 1/3 of all U.S. foreign aid, more than $1 billion a year, now goes to Israel. Yet the black intellectual is effortlessly silenced by the Jewish-dominant publishing, films, and media industries, and by black intellectual opportunists and timid accommodations is in epochs, even while foaming at the bits over the slightest hint of the idea of black matriarchy. Once a sociologist figures of speech of missionary or misnomers or omers for the broken patriarchal of the race. Even black nationalism, intellectual in our day, will assert the existence of matriarchies in ancient Africa. They confess matriarchy and matrimony. I don't know if I pronounce it right. You know what it is. Other than a mythology, there is no anthropology evidence or other real life records of the existence of a matriarchy, where women actually rule men anywhere since the beginning of time. However, white feminists rewriting and infuse even biology textbooks with these new fantasies. Not to mention, history employs the smokescreen that most anthropology of Margaret Mead has been written by men. Let's read that again. Let's go by that again. Other than a mythology, there is no anthropological evidence or other real-life records of the existence of a matriarchy. I'm going to let that sink in. I'm not going further. I'm going to let y'all figure that out. Black intelligently, or black intellects, in terms explain, it has been written by whites, but even so, black intellectuals who profess to find matriarchies are mere accommodating to the white feminist ideal and the white liberal agenda. In claiming to have originated the idea of a matriarchy in ancient Africa, the black intellectuals are in effect outwitting the whites. And that's a big exclamation point. Not long ago, a nationalist dominant group enacts a rule that henceforth and furthermore, one half of its office holders come what may be women year ago at a time when white America Psychology and Association was promoted the unisexual feminist ideology and trying to elect its first woman president. The Associate of Black Psychologists had quietly elected women in one Crescendento to do currently its president is secretary and its treasury. However, the black race will have no patriarchal in a patriarchal land. The black race will outstrip the whites in the service of the white agenda. Meanwhile, unhinging from the most legitimate historical spoken in the wheels of liberation, America is fluttering to the right form of Afro-Americans. The only group bought here predominantly against it will be the ones that gave birth to the blues, and the white liberals have taken the blues and the revolutionary initiative and gone. Dominated by the white ethnic culture of European immigrants, white liberals are dragged and the ambivalent of the WASP, and the silent moral majority of the toe line to unisexualization. Like rape, overwhelming visit upon the blacks and the poor women, abortion is being exploited by white feminists as a weapon in the power struggle between the left and the right. More quietly, a WASP, which means WASP, white ethnic divergence, in being exploited to camouflage in the public mind the more gruesome elements of the unisexual programs of population eugenics. Reagan speaks out against abortion with a fear for a dramatic but a hedge and the toes of bucks to others, so that as of this writing, he has not actually endorsed one anti-abortion law. Before Reagan, Nixon, no card-carrying feminist comment and gave clout and legitimacy qualification federal finance, and amounts to the force of unisexualization, Jerry Ford remains smugly at home with the feminist wife Betty Ford. Lady Bird Johnson had emerged from the closet of Southern comfort to co-sign or co-sense with her daughter, Lyndon Robb. And there is a piece in the Reagan family as his heart goes out to his feminist daughter, Maureen, who wishes to be more like dad instead of mom, and his ballet dancing son. Perhaps the archetype of the future inheritance of the White household or the White House throne. Where is your family now? And what is your family going to? It's the question. And that concludes this chapter, section 2. And like always, I'm gonna leave y'all to judge on the information that was present. There's a lot of jewels that would drop. But like I said, all this was planned from the start. Unisexualization is the one step of, I guess, controlling people, especially non-white people of the world. You be the judge, you make the decision, go back to the information, for your own, reference. But I will end it here. I'd like to thank everybody for listening to this stream. Be on the lookout for the next stream. Till next time, take care.